Think about the last time you watched a sitcom that made you laugh until it hurt. Think about the last time a television comedy made you feel something, not just amusement, but genuine warmth. The kind of warmth that comes from watching people who clearly love each other figure out how to live. The kind of comedy that doesn't just deliver jokes, but delivers truth, and makes the truth funny, and makes the funny feel true. There is a very good chance that somewhere in the credits of that show, if you watched closely enough, you would have seen a name. James Burrows. On Friday, June 20th, 2026, James Burrows passed away peacefully surrounded by his family. He was 85 years old, and in the days that followed, the outpouring from the people who had worked with him, actors, writers, network executives, fellow directors, was unlike almost anything the television industry has produced in response to a single loss. Because James Burrows was not famous the way his casts were famous. He was not the face on the poster. He was not the name casual viewers recognized. He was the man in the room who made everything work, who took a script and a group of actors and found, in his own words, that sweet spot where the best script meets the best performance and the best chemistry between performers. He found that sweet spot more than 1,000 times. This is his story. James Edward Burrows was born on December 30th, 1940 in Los Angeles, and creativity was embedded in his family from birth. His father was Abe Burrows, a Tony Award-winning playwright, composer, and director, best known for writing the book For Guys and Dolls. Growing up in a household where storytelling and performance were simply how things worked, gave the younger Burrows a foundation that most aspiring directors could only dream of. He attended Oberlin College and then the Yale School of Drama, training seriously for a career in the theater. His early professional years were spent exactly there, in theater, working as a stage manager, learning the mechanics of live performance from the ground up. As an assistant stage manager on a Broadway production of Breakfast at Tiffany's in 1967, he had a chance encounter with an actress named Mary Tyler Moore that he couldn't have known would, years later, lead directly to the career that would define him. In the mid-1970s, watching an episode of the Mary Tyler Moore Show from home, Burrows had a realization that he later described as fundamental. A sitcom is, at its core, a 22-minute play, and if he could direct 2-hour plays in summer stock theater, he could direct a television comedy. He wrote to Moore and her then-husband Grant Tinker, who ran MTM Enterprises. They hired him. In 1974, at the age of 33, James Burrows directed his first television episode, a scene in the Mary Tyler Moore Show where Lou Grant moves into Rhoda's old apartment in Mary's building. He was 33 years old, 11 years after graduating from Yale, starting, in a real sense, from zero. He never stopped. The decade that followed Burrows' debut at MTM Enterprises was one of the most prolific apprenticeships in television history. Not an apprenticeship he was served, but one he effectively ran himself. He directed episodes of The Bob Newhart Show, Phyllis, Rhoda, Laverne and Shirley, The Tony Randall Show. He moved between shows and production companies, accumulating a depth of experience with multi-camera sitcom production that nobody else in the industry could match because nobody else was working at the volume he was working at. And then came Taxi. Taxi, which premiered on ABC in 1978, was one of the defining comedies of its era, a workplace sitcom set in a New York City cab depot, with an ensemble cast that included Danny DeVito, Judd Hirsch, Andy Kaufman, Tony Danza, and a young Christopher Lloyd. Burrows directed 76 episodes of Taxi. 76. He essentially lived inside that show for years, developing his understanding of ensemble comedy, comic timing, and the specific art of getting a group of wildly different personalities to function as a unit, while each one remained distinctly, hilariously themselves. The lessons he learned in that cab depot would follow him to a bar in Boston. In 1982, James Burrows co-created Cheers with brothers Glenn and Les Charles, two writers he had worked with on Taxi. The premise was deceptively simple: a bar in Boston where everybody knows your name. A cast of regulars who were funny and broken and human in ways that classic sitcoms had rarely allowed their characters to be. Ted Danson as a washed-up baseball player turned bartender, Shelley Long as the aspiring intellectual who can't quite figure out her own life, Nick Colasanto as the sweetly confused coach, and later Woody Harrelson, Kirstie Alley, Kelsey Grammer, Baby Newworth, a rotating ensemble of characters who felt like people you actually knew. Cheers ran for 11 seasons, 275 episodes, and 28 Emmy Awards. Its 1993 series finale was the second most watched series finale in American television history, second only to MAS. When it ended, it left a hole in NBC's Thursday night lineup that the network would spend the rest of the decade trying to fill. Burrows directed 237 of those 275 episodes himself. not as executive producer overseeing from a distance. In the room, every week, working with the actors, shaping the blocking, finding the timing, building the chemistry that made every scene feel inevitable, even when it was anything but. He attributed the success of Cheers, and of everything else he touched, to a philosophy of directing that was almost the opposite of what most people assume a powerful television director looks like. He told The Hollywood Reporter, "I'm not a martinet or a dictator. I don't come in for the day of rehearsal knowing where my actors are going to be on the stage. I sit with my cast and talk to them about their characters. And then, in perhaps his most revealing self-description, the secret to my success is kindness, which I learned from my father." Kindness, from the most successful sitcom director in the history of American television. After Cheers ended in 1993, Burrows didn't slow down. He became something the television industry had never quite seen before, the most trusted pilot director in the business. When a network had a show they believed in, when they needed a pilot to launch correctly and establish the tone and chemistry that a series would live or die by, they called James Burrows. The list of pilots he directed is frankly staggering. Taxi, Cheers, Friends, Frasier, Will and Grace, The Big Bang Theory, 2.5 Men, Night Court, Wings, News Radio, Caroline in the City, Third Rock from the Sun, Mike and Molly, Two Broke Girls. More than 50 pilots directed, picked up as series. Not 50 pilots that got made, 50 pilots that actually became shows. The distinction matters because pilots fail constantly, and the ones that succeed don't always succeed because of the director. But when the same director's pilots succeed at that rate, across that many shows, across 4 decades of television, the pattern is no longer coincidence. It is craft. Friends premiered in September 1994, and Burrows directed the pilot. He reportedly took the 6 young cast members, Jennifer Aniston, Courtney Cox, Lisa Kudrow, Matt LeBlanc, Matthew Perry, and David Schwimmer, to Las Vegas before production began, specifically so they could bond as a group before being put in front of cameras. He understood from decades of experience that the chemistry between actors on screen comes from something real between the people playing the characters. You can't fake it, but you can build it if you give people the right environment. Will and Grace was perhaps his most significant achievement of the 1990s and 2000s, not just as a television success, but as a cultural one. He directed every single episode of the show's original 8-season run, all 198 of them, and early in that run he pushed back against network pressure in a way that mattered. When an NBC executive told him, during the pilot, that there were too many gay jokes, Burrows replied with 4 words that have since become one of the most quoted things he ever said: "If not here, then where?" The show went on to become one of the most influential in the history of American television in terms of LGBTQ representation. He won 11 Emmy Awards across his career. He was nominated for an Emmy every year between 1980 and 2005, with a single exception. He received the Directors Guild of America Lifetime Achievement Award. In 2015, he became the first person in television history to direct more than 1,000 episodes of television, a milestone NBC celebrated with a star-studded tribute special that reunited the casts of Cheers, Friends, Frasier, The Big Bang Theory, Will and Grace, and more. His last project was Hulu's Mid-Century Modern, which premiered in 2025. Every one of its 10 episodes directed by him. He was working until the very end. When the news of James Burrows' death broke on June 20th, 2026, the tributes from the Friends cast were immediate, and what was striking was not just the depth of feeling, but the specific language they all reached for, independently, separately, in their own words. Father figure. David Schwimmer, who played Ross Geller across all 10 seasons of Friends, described Burrows as paternal in the best sense of the word. Loving, wise, patient, inspiring. He credited Burrows with making the cast feel safe and secure, like a family, while looking out for them both on and off camera. He said Burrows brought out the absolute best in every actor, making every show funnier and more moving than the scripts on their own could have achieved. He called himself forever grateful to have learned from Burrows' incomparable talent. Jennifer Aniston said Burrows had held me through the hardest times and the best of times. She called him a father figure who had shaped her, not just as an actor but as a person navigating one of the most demanding environments in show business. Matt LeBlanc and Lisa Kudrow added their own memories, each one different in detail but consistent in tone: warmth, generosity, safety, gratitude. The fact that 4 people from the same cast independently reached for the same phrase, father figure, is not a coincidence. It speaks to something specific about how Burrows operated in a room. He did not direct from behind a wall of authority. He directed from a place of genuine investment in the human beings in front of him, and the human beings in front of him felt it. Eric McCormack, his Will and Grace star, put it simply: the 800-pound gorilla of television comedy for 50 years, he was beloved by everyone and has left not a mark but a footprint. An incredible legacy. Not a mark, a footprint. The difference between something that leaves a surface impression and something that changes the shape of the ground beneath it permanently. James Burrows wrote in his 2022 memoir that the best sitcoms transcend the screen and reach out and grab the audience by the throat and by the heart. I think about that sentence and about the sheer volume of television he made. More than 1,000 episodes across more than 50 years, from The Mary Tyler Moore Show in 1974 to Mid-Century Modern in 2025. And what strikes me is the consistency of it. Not just the success, but the kind of success. Show after show after show where people felt something. Where the laughter came from somewhere real. Where the ensemble felt like a family because the man in the room behind the camera had made it one. He never had a hit single. He never had his face on a billboard. Most of the people who laughed at his work for 5 decades had no idea who he was. That, in its own way, was exactly how he liked it. He said once that almost any night of the week you could turn on the television and find something he had directed, not as a boast, as a quiet, genuine source of satisfaction. James Burrows passed away peacefully on June 20th, 2026. He was 85 years old. He leaves behind a family who loved him, a television industry that was shaped by him, and a body of work so vast and so beloved that it will be making people laugh for as long as people watch television. That is a legacy that could only have been built, as he himself said, with kindness. Rest in peace, Jimmy. Thank you for all of it. If James Burrows' work touched your life, whether it was Cheers, Friends, Will and Grace, or something else entirely, share your memory in the comments. Take care of each other. I'll see you in the next one.